Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we focus on topics and bring in experts that can help guide you on industry topics, marketing, strategy, things like that to help you build your business. I've got with me a friend of mine, Mike Bann, who is the co-founder of Bann Business Solutions. His family's got kind of a long history of business support, business services over the years, and Mike's kind of the next generation of that. He specializes in what I'll call intent-driven marketing, and we're going to let him tell us more about that today. Spoiler alert, that's what we're talking about. Mike, why don't you tell us just a little bit about Bann Business Solutions and kind of frame up the idea of how did you get started in this whole world of intent-driven marketing?
Great, thanks, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity. So Bann Business Solution is based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we've been around since 1939, if you can believe that or not. But we started as a printing company, and then to a business forms company, and then to a distributorship of business services. And we did a lot of work with businesses that had multi-site locations like Best Buy, things of that nature in the retail world or music land. And from that, we started getting into the whole marketing services arena with data, with direct mail, with digital. And again, we started narrowing our focus into home service, and then to retail and to franchise. And so today, our focus is really around multi-site location dealers, franchises, retailers, things of that nature, and the lead generation with direct response in mind. Now, in terms of intent-driven marketing, since we are direct response, we are trying to help our clients with lead generation. Mm-hmm. And we all know that leads can be good and they can be bad. And so intent-driven are people who have raised their hand and said, I'm interested in your product or your service. How do we know that? We know that from both online activity and offline activity. And so our data partners help us find people who are in market. And to best understand that, we have to know a little bit about our actual client. So we start off our service by looking at the data of who are your clients today, okay? And from that, we can discern things that happen before your typical client ends up making a purchase in your realm. And from that, we gather prospects. And we find out if they are in fact in market. We also find out, do they respond to digital? Do they respond to direct mail? And we will only send or provide leads that do one or the other. And then we use that channel. So I threw a lot of stuff out there, yeah. Dave. I hope that's a good start.
That's a great start. I mean, to be honest with you, it sounds a little bit like magic, right? But so did a compass when that first came out. So I'm guessing we'll all start to wrap our brains around it. That's kind of the intention behind this episode today is, guys, when I met with Mike, I was impressed. And I know quite a bit about marketing and sales. And yet when he started talking to me more and more about intent-driven marketing, I was like, I don't know if any of my clients are doing this right now at all. In fact, it's something I'd like to leverage better myself. So there are some platforms in the technology world that provide buyer intent data, and they charge you like $20,000 a year just to have access to it. Like it's kind of crazy, but I think there's a way that we can make this a scalable solution and educate people about it so they can start leveraging it today. So Mike, I want to break down a few of the things you just talked about. One is there's this concept that there are buyers in the market today. And I've heard statistics ranging from like 3 to 5, 3 to 5% of the addressable market is actively looking for a solution today. You might know better than I do on those metrics, and I'm guessing it varies depending upon seasonality and service. If you're talking about home service, right? Like a lot of people aren't doing exterior paint job research in November. That's okay.
Right.
But the question is, if they're out there, how do we know if they're out there, and then how do we reach them? And so I think you're kind of framing that up for us today. So let's dive in a little deeper and let's talk about the front end of this, which is like, how do we know who is in market? So that's a really
Right.
critical part of this process.
So, what is anyone who typically starts searching for a product or service? They're either reading material or they're Googling material to look at, okay? So our data is wrapped basically around that content. And people who are reading content around a service or a product, and then we notice that happening in more instances than just one, okay? So from there, we then look at those prospects and we say, okay, who are those prospects and where do they live? How much money do they make? You know, can they afford the product or service? Do they fit the model prospect that we're looking for? And if those parameters are met, then we will list that individual household as a prospect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so essentially you're able to identify who's engaging in specific content. Can I give an example
Sure.
and make sure I've got this? And if I'm wrong, just correct me and we'll use
Right.
it as a training moment for everyone. But let's say I'm looking at buying a new electric vehicle. And so
Right.
I'm reading a bunch of articles online about electric vehicles. And because you're tracking my behavior through pixels and or whatever else, you know that, oh, Dave Hansen, this particular pixel has started chasing down this rabbit hole of electric vehicles. He's even gone to websites and looked at his buyer intent. And so then you
Exactly.
take that information and then you pair it with demographic data on the back end to make sure Dave Hansen isn't a 13-year-old young man who's fascinated with Elon Musk. Is that
Right.
a fair summary?
Right. And then the other thing that we will also do is we will look at the actual company's past clients and we'll look at their activities prior to making that purchase, okay? Because today in the world of AI, there's so many things that that can be found and discovered in that customer journey. Everyone talks about the customer journey, and so AI can find those commonalities, and it might be something totally unrelated, but for whatever reason, it happens. And so those are the interesting things. I'm not a data scientist; that's above my head. But in a nutshell, in the 10,000-foot level, that's really what happens.
Well, so that's pretty fascinating, guys. I know we all talk about AI and everything's got AI. I'm sure my mouse has AI in it now. If I were to buy it at the store, it probably has an AI sticker on it. You got to be careful with all the baloney about AI. Most people are just using logic-based code, and it's not true self-learning AI. But in this case, you're leveraging the power of AI models on the back end. That's a lot of data you're trying to assess, and
Yes,
so you can identify your customers' previous clients, then you can use that same technology to assess what did they do leading up to a purchase. And then that
exactly.
can give you kind of a model and a funnel to know, does the behavior of these potential ideal prospects align with that general customer journey or experience that we're tracking? And that lets you know that there's a good match. Is that a fair summary of what you were sharing?
100% yes.
That's pretty cool stuff. So it's also a little creepy to the consumer because I'm sure people are tracking my consumer buying behavior and they're like, why is this guy always looking for like steel pieces
Right.
and like scrap metal? Like I'm sure they're curious why I do that thing. So what?
It is a bit of the big brother, but it's going on, and it's there, and so we're trying to leverage it within reason, and remember, we're trying to find people who are in market. So the advertising that they're getting is relevant, and all the studies have shown that people, when they're presented with relevant advertising, they're way more open to it than they are with getting information that has nothing to do with them. It just doesn't fit them.
Yeah, you're darn right. So let's take it a step further. So you've got these systems that can do this analysis, and you find people. Let's use an example. Can we talk about like a window replacement company. Can we use that as an example?
Sure.
So you would work with your client to figure out like what their specific like clientele looks like, demographics, geolocation, I'm sure things like that. And then you'll also that you can run this assessment to identify who of this broad audience type, this broad persona is aligning with their previous customer data. So you can upload their customer data almost like a lookalike audience in Facebook. Or how does that work?
Well, basically, again, you're right. We have to get permission from our client that wants us to help them to look at their client data. And there can be HIPAA or PII, personal identifiable information, regulations that have to be addressed and looked at. So, but once all that is cleared, yeah, we model the current clients, okay, and we can rank them. And then once we've done that, we also then look at, as I mentioned, what was their purchase history leading up to making a final decision on a product, okay? And then we go into the marketplace and we try to find people, as you say, that are engaged in the similar type activities, both online and offline. What are they subscribing to? What are they reading? What sites are they visiting? And content that they are engaged with. And from that, yes, we can create a list of prospects that can then be tested in terms of engaging them with marketing channels.
I've got to ask you this because I'm genuinely curious. So digital, I get, right? You've got pixels, you can track that. Everyone should know this by now, that all of your online behavior, unless you're in an incognito browser or using DuckDuckGo, everybody can buy that data and knows what you're doing.
Right.
On it. So, but the offline is fascinating to me because that's hard to track. So how can you, and you mentioned this earlier on, like you can tell if people are responding to a mailer or not. How do you
That's old world stuff, Dave, actually. I mean, things that have been done for years. What magazines does someone to subscribe to? What are they a Comcast client? Are they a part of this organization or that organization? You mentioned, being a car enthusiast, being an electric car enthusiast or something like that, or a hunter, something of that nature. So all those offline data points, and companies like Epsilon or Experian, they literally have thousands of data points on every household in the country, everyone. And yeah, that's creepy, but it's the truth. They do. And so we're leveraging those data points both online and offline.
That is fascinating. It is a little creepy. Yeah, thanks Experian for exploiting all of us. I guess that's why the first three letters align with exploitation. But the reality is this data is available today.
Right.
So let's talk about, so that's helpful. Thanks so much. This is actually really interesting for me. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to this stuff, but so let's say I don't have a strategy today for intent-based or intent-driven marketing. What's a good first step? How should I get started in that process? How can I make sure I'm ready for that as a marketing company or marketing organization?
Obviously you have to have first-party data. You want to have all of that on your client base. And if you have that, then you can engage with, someone like Bann to come in and help you. There are very large data co-op companies that companies like us ultimately partner with. And from that, all those data points I talked about, they're engaged with and create programs like the one we're offering around intent data.
Can I take you one step back for a second? You said and this is a terminology thing, so I want to make sure everybody gets it. You said an organization, let's say I'm a window replacement company and franchise. So you said they need to first have first party data.
Right.
What does that mean? Just so our friends that are in
Right.
franchising may not know that can know, do I have first party data? Maybe I don't have first party data. What does that mean?
That means data that you own. So the way you get first party, someone will fill out a lead generation form, okay, and they're a prospect. They might not be a client, but they're a prospect. That's still first party data.
Mhm.
Clients are always first party data as well. That's historical information. And so again, depending upon the product or service that you are marketing, a window company, you only sell windows so often, so it's not based upon repeat. But if I'm selling bubble gum, I want to reach out to that person more. So first party data is even more valuable, if you will, because those people are purchasing on an ongoing basis, daily, weekly, whatever. So
Sure.
again, it varies up and down based upon the product and service that you're marketing.
Yeah, personal service, personal care, those sorts of brands are going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more data available.
Right.
Or let's say like even painting, right? Where it's like every 2 to 3 years, someone's probably going to engage with a painter.
Right.
So it's probably a better example. Although big capital investments like windows and roofs, somebody's Googling, hail damage and reading hail
Heck
damage
yes. Yeah.
articles and stuff like
Yep.
that. Yeah, I can see how that works digitally. That makes sense. And, cool. So they need to own first party data. Then they need to engage an organization like Bann, right? Somebody who's got
Right.
access to all the back end data analysis and AI tools and intent data, kind of that marketplace. So what do they do then at that point? Do they need to hand you a file and say, hey, here's our client database, and here's permission to analyze it and do what you need to create
Correct.
likes?
Yep. Yeah, we take that data and we obviously have to have a minimum amount of data. So we usually want to have, somewhere north of 2,500 records. Preferably we'd have, 10,000. The more data, the better. And we want to analyze, so with some of our larger clients, we want to look at only their best clients, because a lot of people will have different stratospheres of this is a bad client, this is an okay client, and this is a great client. Well, everyone wants more great clients. So we might only look at the great client data. It all depends. But any data is better than no data.
Right.
And that's how ultimately we can come back with a prospect list for the client to look at.
Awesome. So tell me this. So let's say I don't have 2,500. Let's say I've got like 1,000. Is that enough, or would you say I'm sorry, we got to wait?
Yeah, 1,000 is pretty low. I would. So it's interesting. We're talking about let's say go back to the franchise world, right? An individual franchise who owns one location, they might not have enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe they want to partner with 3 or 4 of their franchise partners that they don't compete against, obviously. So you get enough data. So that's an easy way to get around something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. So really, you're just trying to build the persona in the data. It doesn't have to be the persona in the marketplace specifically,
Right.
because you can then draw some geofencing to get specific leads
Yep.
and data out of that geo. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So really, like the CMO at a franchise system can work with the franchisees and gather up enough data. So this should not be a problem for really any brand, unless they're micro emerging, have 1 or 2 locations, and have a total of 500 people in their customer database. Then you've got a little bit of a challenge.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So a question for you, because I'm sure somebody's squirming, and attorneys listening to this, right? How does an organization make sure that when they provide access to you to their client data, that they're compliant with like CCPA and all the fun restrictive data sharing and privacy laws?
Right. So I share all that back end information with any prospective client so that they know that ourselves and our partners are all compliant.
Okay. Gotcha. And then there's really no, I mean, if somebody's giving you permission to have access to their data, you're not doing anything in particular with the data other than analyzing trends and then using it to identify other people like them, right?
Right. I mean, there are times when I don't need even a name. I just need an address. In some instances, I just want to know if a purchase was made. Sometimes I want to know, what the dollar volume is. There are different scenarios for different prospects.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So now we take the data. You guys do your analysis. You create essentially. I would call it a lookalike audience. What do you call that? Like your persona, like that you're identifying out in the space that.
Well,
The
but
types of
there's a difference between a lookalike and an intent-driven prospect.
I
Okay.
explain. Yeah, what's the difference?
So a lookalike just means that they have a lot of the attributes of someone who might typically buy your product or service. Okay.
Yeah, got
It
it.
doesn't mean that they've raised their hand with interest. The intent-driven prospect has literally raised their hand and saying, I'm in market. Okay. I might not know your brand. Okay. Or I might know your brand. But bottom line, I'm in market. And so therefore, there is no better prospect than that person who has already raised their hand.
Yeah. Perfect. Let's. I want to ask this question because I know some people are going to need to know. Let's talk about me, right? So let's say I wanted to do this for our company. I think some people are probably getting a little scared about price tags at this point because it sounds really awesome. So how would we assess what the cost would be? And let's talk about a single entity first, and let's talk about like a distributed franchise type model. How much would it cost to engage with a group? And I know you're spitballing, so be high level, and everyone listening, don't try to like hold this guide to this, but yeah,
I could share, a current offer we have out on the table, if that makes sense, Dave.
Sure. Yeah,
as an
please.
example. I mean, so right now we're running an offer that we'll take a look at your data and we'll provide you back with 10,000 prospects in your marketplace for a price of $1,200. And you can choose to market to them as you might want to, okay? But because of our expertise on the channels and how to market to these people, we also offer the ability where we'll waive that $1,200. But we're going to do the direct mail and we're going to do the digital for them, and be able to have a full-in cost of let's see here, somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 cents per piece for like a 6x9 postcard to go out to those 10,000 people. And that includes the data, that includes the printing, and that includes the postage. And so it's a great way to test this. And if you want to layer email on top of it or digital display, we can do that. And those costs are add-ons, but they don't add on a lot.
Yeah. And how do you partner? Because in a lot of franchise systems, they've got a chief marketing officer, they've got a team of people that are supporting the franchise marketing. Do you partner with those teams if, let's say, you're doing the direct mail piece, and then is there a way for you to plug what they're doing into the rest of this ecosystem so you're keeping data consistent?
Yeah, I mean, I work with franchise groups, and then I work with some corporate franchise. So either way, my goal, ultimately our goal, is to get to the corporate level because they will introduce you to much more of the franchise group, or same thing with a dealer network. as well. And so, but we have relationships that start either directly with an individual franchisor, and some that start individually with the marketing team, the corporate marketing team.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it's affordable, no, I wasn't expecting that. I thought it'd be a lot more expensive than this. So that's actually really cool. I can see how you can start bottom up. Franchisees might say, "Hey, look, I need this," and it makes their lives a lot better. Boy, certainly, I'm guessing close rates would be a lot higher. So tell me this. Let's say I wanted to get started, and there's not 10,000 people in the market looking right now for that service. Let's say it's us, right? Because we're a niche service that really focuses on franchising, but there are 5,000 franchise brands right now, right? So approximately, there might not be 10,000 total leads for a company like me, or in a specific market with a niche service. Let's say you're doing like custom cabinetry or something like that. How do you address that? Do you outside of my territory now I can't sell?
So again, it's one of two things. In the franchise world, we would try to coach that franchise to partner with other franchises, so we get the critical mass that we need to get.
Okay.
And maybe there might be some prospects I can't fit everyone, so I'm not going to be of value to everyone.
Right.
But we try to figure out how we can add value, and if we can, we'll tell them that, and if we can't, we'll share that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And even if it's not 10,000, I mean, is this 5,000 prospects? I mean, it seems like that's still a ton.
Right. No, I mean, it certainly. We're happy to do that. We provide the information back. So you're going to know what the numbers are. And if we can't find the prospects, we're going to tell you that. And we're not going to pre-charge you for the execution of the channels. We're going to charge you for the data work, but that's all.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like it's a valuable service, even if you're delivering. I mean, some places will charge you upwards of $1 to $5 per prospect that they deliver, and that's not even with that's just demographics and lookalike.
Right.
It's not intent data, so feels more valuable than that anyway. I was just curious about that. How do you engage? So let's say someone works with you, because this is now where things get interesting in my mind. So I now have a list. Let's say I have a list of ideal people that are in market looking for a solution. Then and I have a list of data from you. Ideally, like I'm working with you to do some sort of direct mail and things like that with them.
Right.
I will have mailing addresses. What other information would I typically get from this sort of analysis?
So typically there's going to be a mailing address, an email address, and there could be an IP address, and there also could be a phone number. And again, it varies from one client or prospect to the next. But typically, that's the information that you're going to get. Obviously, if we're going to execute a direct mail, we have to have the mailing address. Same with an email. And if we have a mailing address, we're always going to be able to append to an IP address for that house as well.
Got it. Yeah, that's powerful, and you can use that IP address to do like very specific targeted display ads and things like that, right? You upload an IP address list. I mean, that's not rocket science, but if you don't know what that means, maybe do you want to explain that for a second, Mike? Because some folks might not realize what that means.
The IP address is the address that your computer signals out of your residence emanate from. And so it allows us to send the display ads, that you'll see on your mobile devices or on your laptops or iPads and things of that nature. And so typically you like to pair digital with the direct mail, because we know study after study, case study, the incremental conversion rates increase with an omni-channel approach
Mhm.
to these prospects.
Yeah. And think of it like a magnifying glass, right? You're already getting the impact, but it's just going to increase the impact of what you're doing. It'll increase your ROI, and digital ads are pretty inexpensive, really. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Now, what happens? Just a random question. So I travel a fair amount, especially in the next couple of months. A bunch of industry events are happening again. So you've got my persona data, and you might be doing display ads to my IP address here at the house, but I'm on the road with my phone. How would you put display ads on that device while I'm not in that?
So eventually we get your mobile ID, and that's called a MAID. And your MAID goes with you wherever you go. And so then you can target ads to the mobile ID as well.
Now that sounds creepy, not gonna lie. Cool. Well, that's really important information to know, guys. This is fairly sophisticated stuff, right? Behind the scenes with marketing. But if you've ever felt victim to some really sophisticated marketing that got you interested in buying something, you're dealing with someone kind of like a Mike Bann who's coaching someone to build this experience around your life that keeps their concept, that whatever they're selling, in front of you, so you want to buy. Yeah, this is cool. So what else? So what else would I do? So describe an ideal engagement strategy for us? Once I've got all the data, I've got the persona, I got the information ready. What would be an ideal engagement strategy? We started down that road and I distracted you. So please share.
Well, again, what we want to do, in any good marketer knows you test, you measure, you modify, right? And so we always are going to talk about the direct mail, because a lot of what we do, these prospects have previously responded and converted off of direct mail pieces. Therefore, we want to help the prospect design the correct direct mail piece, whether that be an envelope or a postcard. And then they may have their own internal design and creative people, which is fine. They may want to leverage us to do that. We want to talk about the idea of how often they should be engaging with these prospects, because a lot of people think, well, I sent a direct mail piece and it wasn't converted on, and so it's a failure. And what marketers have to understand is that the prospect is in control of the decision, and they will buy in their own time. And as a marketer, it's our job to be there when they're ready to buy. In our case, because it's intent driven and they've already raised their hand, it's incumbent to be in front of them quickly and maybe a couple of times. And so again, going back to the testing, and to look at the purchase again. Is it what's called a considered purchase? Okay, you're going to buy a car. You don't make a snap decision and go out and buy a car tomorrow. Okay, generally most of us don't. Same thing with a $25,000 worth of windows. Okay, if it's a pair of golf shoes, well, yeah, I might go out tomorrow and buy that. So you have to know what you're selling, and therefore we take all that into account in how many times we're going to hit someone with the marketing, what channels we're going to leverage, and then at the end of the day, we're going to do a matchback analysis so that we can check the ROI, or the ROAS, as a lot of people call it, the return on advertising spend, so that we can further optimize this as we move forward and continue to improve what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're smart. I was just talking to folks about that. There's a gentleman that I got to spend some time with at a conference, Kevin Harrington, and he presented right before I did. And the crux of he wrapped up his presentation. He was the original shark on Shark Tank, and he said, "Look, I'm not smart. I'm paraphrasing. He said, I'm not smarter than everybody else. I'm just not afraid to fail, and I iterate faster than everyone else. And that's what I do. I measure and I change it. I measure and I change." He's like, that's his superpower. That's why he's
Right.
been able to be so successful in any ventures. And I'm sure he's had some that weren't as successful. But if you're willing to spend the money, take the risk, and then measure and then change and then measure and then change, and you do that faster, then you evolve faster than others and you find success faster than others. That's the secret to life. It's not
Right.
that you have to fail first, right? But so fail
Yeah.
fast. Was it Malcolm Gladwell? Was that his book, Fail
I
Fast? I
think it
forget.
was.
Yeah, but it's if it wasn't, it was someone like him, a thought leader in business. But I love what you're saying here. Tell me about so when I mean, who should they be working with to build this cohesive strategy? Because do you guys do all of it? Do you do and do a lot of companies have the sophistication to build a digital and a display ad campaign around the like the mobile ID as well as the local IP address? Or there's specialty people that only can do these things?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A lot of companies, especially when I mentioned earlier that we came out of the print world, and a lot of people in the print world have put on what I call their marketing hat. And today I am a marketer, and they're really not. So you do have to be careful, because I would always say that at the end of the day, they're trying to spin the wheels on that printing press, and they have to answer to all that capital investment. Companies like us, we don't have those capital investments, so we partner and bring in partners when we need them and leverage them as such. So that's really our I guess our secret sauce is that we're not married to any one way of doing it or to any one partner. So if I were to give advice to anyone, I would make sure that those partners have some independence from the actual execution channels that they're going to be leveraging.
Okay, that's great advice. Uh, this has been fantastic. I mean, we only hinted at it a little bit. We did an entire podcast about the efficacy of direct mail, guys, with Daniel from Service Moxie or SendJim. That's a fun plugin. We do a little bit of this already in Client Tether, but it's broad spectrum. It's not zeroed in on this particular audience that's got their hand in the air looking to buy. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal. And this whole idea of finding the people that are looking to buy right now, spending your marketing dollars to acquire them, feels like ROAS, ROI, you're going to have much better metrics. Do you want to share any thoughts, Mike, on what type of results are people generally seeing when they engage in intent-driven marketing versus just broadband broadcast marketing?
Well, again, excuse me, it's going to vary from one client to the next. But the bottom line is that whatever their metrics are now, it's going to improve it anywhere from 10 to 25%. And why? Because you're dealing with people who are in market. That you just can't top that. And you're exposing yourself to prospects who may or may not know anything about you. And that combination is exponential, and is certainly minimally worth testing for most any product or service.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you were to ask, let's say Heather McLeod or Marcy or over at HFC or so head of marketing at another big platform company in the industry that does home services, look at veteran service brands, look at home run franchise. There are a whole bunch of people, premium, bunch of folks that are building Belfour, right?
Right.
their marketing team would freak out if they could get a 10% increase
Right.
in their overall performance, overall ROI, ROAS on their current spend and behavior. So if you start, and when you start to multiply that effect, right, the effect of a 10% increase in performance across 500 locations or across 1,800 locations, or in some cases, 30,000 locations, that's going to have a massive impact on return on investment for the franchisor in terms of royalties paid in, franchisee success, item 19 growth, which ultimately it's the flywheel, right? Now you're fueling and perpetuating success within the system.
Exactly. And it kind of will go back to the AI that we talked about earlier, and the fact that the thing about AI is that it continues to get smarter with more data that's put in. And this is, I'm not an AI expert, but I do know that a lot of people talk about good AI and bad AI.
Uh-huh.
And this is part of the good AI. It's not part of the bad AI. And so that's something that I'm proud to be able to hang my hat on.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. And you, Mike, you've been phenomenal today. I think you framed up a really interesting perspective that a lot of people need to be taking into their marketing strategy. One thing right now, we have some headwinds in the market, guys, and so it's harder to get the same level of leads you had before. There's not as much buyer intent in the market, but there's still plenty. But what it means is the broadcast marketing strategies might not be working the same as they were. I'm hearing a lot of grumblings about that in the industry today. So if you're interested in a way to pivot, you want to chat with somebody who's an expert in the space, Mike, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and find you?
They can find me. My email is mike@bann, BANNBIZ as in zebra.com. Bannbiz.com is our website, and phone number is 612-701-8078. So those are the best ways to get a hold of us.
Excellent. And thank you again for being an expert with us today. This is
Thank
a
you,
topic
Dave.
I think a lot of people need to know more about. So we appreciate you joining the podcast today.
I appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate everyone for listening.
Thanks, Mike.